What is going on, guys? Welcome back into the film room. I'm your host, Erik Turner. Thanks to everyone in the chat room joining us, but I got to introduce my man from Disguise Coverage, Anthony Prohaska. What's up, brother?
Oh, man, a lot of prep went into this episode. I'm exhausted already.
I know. We were talking before we went live, guys, about, all the issues that we saw on film over the last week and a half, because we initially planned on starting our draft, as scouting, and we were going to do a running back to start just because of the, the hype that was behind the position and the mock drafts that were popping out and coming out. But when we started to look back at the film on, trying to profile what type of back the Bills would be looking for, or what type of prospects they would be looking for, we really couldn't give you an answer without studying and self-scouting, just like the Bills, I'm sure, are doing right now down at One Bills Drive. So, Anthony, from the top, man, 30,000, view, like, where are you with the run game of the Bills from 2020?
Perplexed, frustrated. The phrase that you kept using and that I've become accustomed to as we've gone through all this film is rabbit hole over and over. You start with one thing and figuring out, like, okay, like, let's take a look at the running backs. And then you start looking at the running backs and then you realize, okay, there's some things that are wrong with the offensive line. Let's take a look at this. And then you start looking at that and it's like, okay, well, they weren't good with this scheme. So what was it like with this scheme? And then the next thing you know, you're like 7 hours deep in film. Mm-hmm. And granted, I'm probably biased here, but we've gone through a lot of tape and I think we have a very good holistic view of what the Bills running game was like in 2020. And I came into it thinking that there needed to be some like small tweaks here and there. And as you and I were talking off air, I've come away from it thinking like, okay, there's some larger structural fixes that we need that are more than just like, well, we need better guard play, or, well, let's get a faster running back. There's some larger factors here in play and at work, and they need to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way I felt too. I thought, tweak the scheme a little bit, add a little more talent, maybe a change of pace guy in the running back room, like, we should be good to go. But then we just kept finding these different situations, and we studied every situation, short yardage, base concepts, first and 10 concepts. I mean, we went through shotgun versus under center. We went for, light boxes versus stacked boxes. We literally dove into every single rabbit hole we could to try to find a trend. And we found a couple, those are the ones we're going to cover tonight, primarily how the Bills change their scheme from more of a gap style to a more of a zone concept run offense. And then, their struggles of running against light boxes, 6 guys or less in the box. And those are the two main issues we're going to cover tonight. But there literally were issues, in the offensive line in some areas, in some situations, in some concepts. But then there are other areas where, okay, the running back struggled here, or, they just couldn't break a tackle. Or so what it comes down to is it's a little bit of everything, guys. And we're going to try to cover that in as much time as we can tonight. We'll try to keep it short, but it's, Anthony and I breaking down film. It's probably not going to happen. It's probably lengthy, but I want you guys to come away from this with, your own perspective. We're going to try to break down the scheme. We're going to break down, obviously, the analytics. We're going to break down the personnel, whether it's the offensive line, the running backs, who's kind of at fault. And we want you to, by the end, to have, a decent idea and opinion of your own. We'll let you know where we think a lot of those issues lie at the end. But we want to hear some of your theories right now. Let's kick the show off in the chat room. We want to hear some of your issues and what you think was the main issue with the run game. Michael says that he thinks it's more on the O-line than the running backs. The one stat that has jumped out to him is that they were top 3 in light boxes, but 18th in yards per carry with light boxes. Good point there. Scott wants to know right off the bat. He's interested to see if it's the running back room or offensive line. Why don't you, stay with us, Scott? I know it's going to be a little while, but we're going to get some film, and then we'll have some answers for you there. So, send us your theories and your perspectives. And Greg says, yes, so many sad rabbit holes. Yes. And honestly, Anthony, tell the viewers, how many different clips did I send you? I had several playlists with so many different clips that we had to try to whittle it down to, I think we ended up with 20.
Yeah. We started out with, every
gap run. So 60 gap runs. And then the light box, it was I think it was like 30 or 40. It was 50 total, but I think I cut 40.
Yep. And what we do is, so Erik is the best at setting up the film and knowing like, okay, like here's what we have to choose from, and then we kind of go back and forth and figuring out what to do. And I kept thinking it would narrow down more and more. And so you'd be like, hey, here's what we're going to start with. And I'd be like, okay. And you'd be like, all right, so I whittled it down. And then I'd go into it and there was still like 60. And I was like, okay, when are you whittling it down? And you were like, I did whittle it down. And I was like, oh, and it just kept staying. And eventually, like you said, we got down to when we really narrowed the focus and the scope after pouring through everything and really trying to figure out and pinpoint what the trends were and how to go forward in telling this story for this episode. That's when it got down to 20. But for a good point, we were at, like 40 to 50 consistently.
Yeah, definitely. And so, we're seeing a lot of theories in the chat box today. I love them. And, again, I think you guys are going to be happy, how much we actually cover a lot of these things, and we're going to just work our way through it. So when you're looking back at this film and what happened in the run game, obviously the passing game was great. That was a focal point. During practice, they're spending all those hours practicing protections, running the routes and the plays and all that stuff. So a lot of their time is spent practicing the passing game. Totally cool with that. Totally okay with the production that came out of the passing game, obviously, being a top offense in the league. But there are other factors on why the run game struggled. Obviously, one of the answers in the chat room, one of the theories was odd offseason. Totally true. With COVID and how that hit and how, a lot of the meetings were just virtual, definitely was a factor. Personnel obviously was a factor. We're going to get to that probably right off the bat. And then philosophy, obviously the change in philosophy from a passing to a passing centric offense is a big factor in that. And then just the scheme within that philosophy and how formations are set up, where guys are aligned, because a lot of times, guys, you got to remember formations will dictate how many guys are in the box. You have 10 personnel and you have 3-by-1 formations with everyone spread out, no condensed formations. Well, that's going to naturally lighten the box because they're worried about all the weapons you have outside. So different factors roll into all the issues that they had in the run game. And so I want to start with personnel, and I want you to kind of, inform a lot of the viewers and listeners of, some of the things that really, hampered from a personnel standpoint and the shuffling of the offensive line in and out, injuries, and even some injuries in the running back room.
So we started going through film, and then I started charting all the different line combos. And then I completely forgot when I looked at the snaps in the beginning. I was like, oh, man, Quentin Spain was a starter in the beginning of this year. Quentin Spain saw 100% of the snaps in week 1, 95% in week 2, then 0% in week 3, 52% in week 4, and then he was done. And it was really that interior of the line. We saw Dawkins at left tackle and Darrell Williams at right really hold down those posts. But the interior of the line, whether it was injury or poor play, we just saw significant snaps from Quentin Spain, Cody Ford, John Feliciano, Brian Winters, Mitch Morse, Ike Bodker. To your point, there was just a lot of shuffling and a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving pieces. You had 5-6 guys in the interior of your line see significant snaps. And when I say significant snaps, I mean multiple in several weeks where they were seeing 100% of the reps. And when you're doing that, in and of itself, it's hard to build consistency, let alone to build on top of your point earlier, Erik, of you're practicing more passing offense than you are running. You're doing more pass pro than you are run blocking. And when you add in that lack of consistency and cohesion in playing together and knowing your assignments and knowing how to connect with the person next to you, or even from the running back's perspective in knowing, okay, the tendencies of your guys up front and how do they block and what do they do and how you need to cut off them and what their timing is like, it throws an extra wrench into a unit and a game plan and a scheme that was already having to be tweaked and having to be adjusted. You threw up the graphic there.
Well, here's the main thing, right, Anthony? The scheme changed. This is 2019, the run blocking scheme from 2019, and you see the blue. There's a lot more gap scheme in 2019. So the Bills were a gap team, and that really checks out when you talk about Dable when he came from Alabama and really his whole lineage and his whole coaching tree. A power, a gap scheme, and that's what he brought to Buffalo. And up until this year, that was really the scheme. There was, some good weeks in there where they mixed in more zone, and there was more balance overall. But their identity was a gap or power type scheme. But this year, Anthony, as you said, some of the shuffling up front and going away from Quentin Spain, going, inserting Cody Ford, then he getting hurt, him struggling at times, him bouncing around, Ike Bacher getting thrown into the lineup, Mitch Morse in and out, Feliciano in and out. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces and parts that it makes it difficult for an offensive line unit to, get that rapport and get that continuity together over a length of time when you having these guys in and out of the lineup. And so, as you said, it changes things, not just from the perspective of the offensive line, but it does from a play calling perspective, a play design perspective. Obviously, you saw they had to get away from gap scheme. And just from my experience, gap schemes are a little more complex. Mm-hmm. There's a lot different and a lot more line calls and adjustments that can be made at the line of scrimmage from play to play, where, sometimes you'll get a certain call based on the front you're seeing, where the next play you'll see a different front. Well, now you got a different call. There's a different down block. There's a different puller. So that takes a little more time to build cohesion, but also it takes a little more time when you're talking week to week preparations of understanding your assignment and being on the same page with guys next to you. So I think, don't get me wrong, there are some, complex zone concepts, but usually there's a set, 7 tags in a zone run that, could change what type of combination block, how heavy you're hanging on that combo and climbing, all things that are a little easier to execute in a game because I don't think there's as many answers per se. But I think that it's easier to teach and to move along throughout a season when you have guys in and out of the lineup.
Yeah, when you have that zone scheme and you're more, I don't want to oversimplify it, but you're more blocking an area than you are pure assignment, and knowing just the multitude of things that can go wrong when you're blocking with gap scheme. But again, like you mentioned, it depending on the front, depending on what blitz action is happening in front of you, if there's any stunts in front of you, knowing who your assignment switches to, and just the complexity of pullers and pins and down blocks. And as we're going to go into in the film in a little bit, you'll see how if just one of those actions is off, it ruins the entire integrity of the blocking scheme, and it ruins things for the running back. And as we saw this 2020 season progress, as you saw in the graphic there, it was just such a massive change in the running scheme with gap versus zone. And just to put it, I know we saw the graphic, but just pure numbers. In 2019, the Bills ran zone runs 110 times, and they ran gap scheme 156. So more gap than zone, but decently kind of balanced. In 2020, we saw 181 zone attempts and 62 gap attempts, more than double the amount. You saw the separation between the red dots and the blue dots as we went forward. The Bills just kind of faded that whole gap concept, and we're just like, listen, we can't do it. We're not executing. We need to move forward in a different way. And it altered their entire set of play calling and design from about midweek all the way through the playoffs.
Yeah, and if you guys remember in 2019, I thought, as far as gap scheme goes, and we classify a lot of those, anytime there's a puller, that's considered a gap scheme, and that's the way Sports Info Solution breaks it down. You see, zone runs versus gap runs on the screen right here. The Bills ran a lot of those pin and pull runs in 2019 that got, Devin Singletary on the perimeter, got Mitch Morse out in space, got Spain out in space, and no one wanted a piece of him. They excelled on those pin and pull runs, those gap style runs in 2019. So much so, Motor Singletary in 2019 on gap runs, he averaged 6.7 yards per attempt on 57 attempts. I mean, so a lot of those explosive plays were coming on those gap runs. And you see him in gap runs this year, it dropped to 4.9 yards per attempt, which sounds good. Hey, it sounds pretty good. But as far as league ranking, it's not all that good. So the Bills, as we said, they switched to more of a zone run scheme, and you can see Devin Singletary averaged 4.3 yards per attempt in zone runs, and Moss was 4.6. But if you look at where Moss was in gap runs, he was at 4. So 4 and 4.9 for gap, 4.6, 4.3 for the running backs in zone runs. But overall in their zone runs, the reason why they stuck with it was not just because of the personnel, but overall their yards per attempt were 6th across the league just for running backs. Keep that in mind. All these stats tonight are just running backs alone, no quarterback runs or scrambles or anything like that. So, but what was so weird about them going to zone, which I want a little more diversity in the run game, was that when they went to gap runs, which between Singletary and Zach Moss, we saw 60 carries, only 60 carries out of 62 attempts the entire year as a team, as an offense, in the running back room, 62 attempts. So it's weird that they favored Singletary a little bit more in gap runs, with Moss only getting 19 attempts when, I thought Moss was pretty good in gap runs coming out of Utah last year.
Yeah, that was a big surprise in looking at the numbers and going through the film and seeing just how much they trusted Devin Singletary in the gap runs, because if I'm picking between Moss and Singletary and who's going to run those inside runs and get those gap runs, I would have leaned Moss based on his body type and his skill set and the type of runs that he had at Utah. And when looking at Singletary, you saw how explosive he was in 2019. He had 12 runs of 10 plus yards outside the right end and outside the left end. So he was excelling in getting outside, and you saw the usage this year, and it was just odd. And you kind of put those things together, and as you start to look at the film and see, why were they doing this and what was the reason for it? And you start to piece it all together, and you start at the beginning and then put the numbers together and then put more film and put that whole puzzle together. You can start to see, and as we pull up the runs by direction, you can start to see why they shifted. But that was a big one for me too. I would have thought Moss was more of that gap banger than Devin Singletary, but based on the touches, he far out touched him when it came to those gap runs.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up, some of the explosive plays or 10-plus runs through Pro Football Focus. And you guys can see the top 2 10-plus runs directions were left guard and middle right, which, you don't think Singletary would excel in that area, but he got a few of those runs inside. But last year, just looking at it, you can tell that it was a completely different style of run game for a guy like Motor Singletary. If you look at his top runs, as you said, outside, left end, right end, those pin and pull runs with, that gap scheme and getting him the perimeter. A lot of people say, Singletary and Moss don't have that speed to get to the perimeter. Yes, but in certain concepts, they don't have the flat out speed to win a corner on any given concept and bounce it on any given concept. But if you get those guards pulling out in space and you get, Singletary being able to set up those blocks in almost the same manner that it reminds me of McCoy when Anthony Lynn and Roman were running offense in Buffalo, and the Bills were just scoring in an enormous, just so many touchdowns and just crushing it through the run game when they were running those pin and pull runs outside. Motor can set up those kind of blocks. He just can't run. Like if you pitch it to him, he's probably not going to turn the corner unless he has a blocker in front of him that he can use to set up some blocks. And we go back to the offensive line. They're not the most athletic group. They weren't as a unit. They just weren't. Especially once Spain was gone, he was a guy they relied on a lot, as I said. Darrell Williams, great in a phone booth, right? A monster in a phone booth, but he's not a guy that gets out in space all that well.
No, that was a big one for me. We've seen all the chatter and the talk, even going back to November, December, when we were looking towards this offseason of, okay, Milano and Darrell Williams and John Feliciano. And I think a lot of people just got it in their head that Darrell Williams was a given. And his pass pro was very good. He limited a lot of strong pass rushers that the Bills saw this year. But it was really concerning for me to see some of the struggles that he had in the run game, because it wasn't just okay, like a misassignment or he just got beat on this play. It was some really bad technique and some really odd decisions. And just at times, again, you and I were joking off air where you just saw him come and look like this around the corner. It was like, dude, just block someone, just do something. And when you're piecing those things together, it's a difficult watch, as we discovered pretty early on.
Yeah, and I know Azar here says, don't draft the running back in the first round. I know, I get it. I understand it. Although they are picking near the second round, but like I said, when we get to the end, after looking through all the stats and all the film, we'll kind of talk about that stuff and wrap it up in a bow for you guys. But without further ado, let's Anthony, let's jump into the film. Let's have some fun. I should put fun in quotes.
I was going to say, I was like, that might not be the right choice of words here.
So we're going to start with, again, gap scheme. They went away from it. So we're going to show you several plays here on why they went away with it. Because you got to think about it from the perspective from a coach's perspective, right? You got to think, okay, why the hell would they go away from something that worked quite well last year, especially when, Singletary was returning as a quasi starter, 1A, 1B guy, and he excelled over 6 yards a carry in gap runs in 2019. Like, why would they get away from that? Why would they go to zone runs? Greg, appreciate you, brother. I'm glad you tuned in, man. We've been going back and forth on Twitter. And I'm glad that you could jump in the film room with us and take some time off, man. You're always working, you're always engaging people. Like, take some time off and join us in the film room for once, and not having to prep all the time for your show. So sit back, grab your drink, and enjoy the film with us, brother. So let's get into the film. So on this first play, again, gap run. So usually on a gap run, you're going to get a down block at the point of attack. And on this play, it's Darrell Williams on the left side of the screen. And I want you to watch his down block or lack thereof. And then the down block from Dawson Knox, who he's disappointed me this year. His blocking was actually quite good in 2019. 2020 was a whole nother story. So here we go. Down block at the point of attack by Williams on Christian Wilkins. Bad angle. Does not even seal him off there. And that allows obviously Wilkins, who's a good player, don't get me wrong, stack and shed him. Now he's in the gap. So no down block. No down block at the point of attack. Watch Knox's angle to the ball, angle to the linebacker, Jerome Baker. Totally misses it. Doesn't come down inside. Baker slips by him and completely blows up the run play there. So, I mean, right off the bat, Anthony, just bad blocking at the point of attack.
Yeah, this is one of the ones we started with, and it starts right with Darrell Williams and his head placement inside, and he's not able to swing around and seal that edge. And the waters are just muddied, and it just gums up the whole works with what Wilkins is able to do. And when you compound that with Dawson Knox, he comes right off the line, and he barely gets a hand on Jerome Baker and allows him to come free right into the hole. And this is the thing that we wanted to address right away, and why this is one of the clips we chose first. We keep seeing, I'm seeing in the comments already, all the talk for running back in the first round. And, we need a better running back, and we need a better running back. But there are some things that exist with this running scheme, i.e. the change from gap to zone, and some of the things we're going to highlight and why, that just having a better running back doesn't fix. It doesn't matter if you have Najee Harris or Etienne or Barry Sanders back there. If you can't just execute a simple down block, your running game is going to struggle massively, massively, massively. And there's also one more thing I wanted to point out as we started to get into things. Greg had mentioned it in the chat. When we talk about improving the running game here, I don't want anyone to get confused and necessarily think that we're talking about more volume. Running the ball more is not the same as being a good running team. When we run it, we just need to be impactful, especially with all the light boxes that we see, which we're going to get into. When we run the ball, we need to be effective. That could be 2 carries or it could be 20 carries, but we're not necessarily talking about more volume when we say a better running game.
Yeah, that's a good point. I said offline, I've said it on Twitter as well, I like the formula they have. They just need to be better. And that's why we're looking at these plays. I told Anthony before we went live, I'm going to be hyped this show because this is great. This is awesome to see, the self-scouting portion. I like it, but it's also frustrating because the formula was working. The formula is there. Everything is there. They just need to execute better. So on this play, you're going to see the combination block between Spain and Dawkins on the left side of the screen. And on these gap runs, those two, Dawkins and Spain, this is week 1, they are working to the backside linebacker. Generally, that's who they're working to, the backside linebacker, as I noted right here, Neville Hewitt. But what happens here is the defensive tackle plays into Dawkins. So normally he is the driver, and he's moving that guy, obviously, this way, or at least up the field this way. And then, they're peeling off for that linebacker. But you see here, the defensive tackle plays with outside leverage here. And that's exactly the entry point for the running back. So, again, I don't know if this was just a bad combination block, or deuce block is what we call it. Ace block is right here between the center and guard. Deuce block is the guard and tackle. I don't know if this is just a bad block by Dawkins, but either way, the entry point is shut off here. There's no way that the running back Singletary can hit it up where he's supposed to, where Cody Ford is going to block. So he has to cut it back up inside, and that's where the linebacker's waiting. And I mean, 2-yard gain on the play?
Yeah, literally a 2-yard gain. And you see where the hole is supposed to be and where Cody Ford is supposed to be leading Singletary up into that hole. Dawkins gets no seal, and the defender is just sitting in the hole. And then Spain, who comes off the deuce block, he gets his man. He starts to force him outside, and Singletary again, he has to cut it back right away. And again, another point of maybe a better running back can do some things or fall forward
Outside
for
of scheme.
4 yards.
Yes.
Exactly. But it's just not executed up front. And it happens almost from the jump. And it's from someone, again, Deion Dawkins. He had a very good year. But look at as soon as, stop it right there. Dawkins gets stood almost straight up. He loses leverage, and the defender turns him. In this situation right here, Dawkins, despite having help from Spain inside, the defender is in control of that block right there. And considering that is pretty much the most important point of this run, because that's where the hole is supposed to be, and that's where the run is going. This play, granted, you could have somebody make a great move or something miraculous can happen here, but this play is almost, the proverbial doomed from the start just because Dawkins loses so bad at that point of attack.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man. And it's one of those things like, hey, having a running back that can play outside of the scheme or above the scheme, like we always say. I think a lot of the times those guys, Joe, are probably found in the earlier rounds. I think that drafting a guy in the first round is the smart, reasonable thing this year? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I think, to the point, this is a perfect play where maybe a bigger back, maybe a quicker back, maybe, someone that has more skill than Devin Singletary all around could make something, out of a, instead of a 2-yard gain into a 5-yard gain. I mean, that could be a big difference on a play or on the drive or in a game. I mean, those little things matter. Again, I don't think I want to put this on Singletary. He's got nothing from the jump, as Anthony said. So we're going to move on to a play that looked very similar, but this is a good play. We're going to show you what a good power run looks like. And you see Devin Singletary against the Niners get north and south here, breaks a tackle of Warner. So we're going to show you what a good power looks like. So this is that deuce block. This time it's between Dawkins and Bakker right there. So there it is. See, the angle is so much different. Now that defensive tackle does a great job. We call that near knee. Get that near knee down when you see that combination block, that deuce block coming. And then when that dissipates when he peels off to go get that linebacker, that backside linebacker, that's when you come up and try to make a play. But you see good blocking at the point of attack. You get a little movement there, and Dawkins passes the defensive tackle to Bakker. And then Singletary now has a blocker in front of him that he can use to set up Warner right there to break a tackle to get north and south for a good gain.
This is a good example of, one, it's a good combo from Dawkins in helping out and then getting to the second level. Good seal on the outside. And again, Fred Warner, one of the best linebackers in the NFL, extremely athletic. But this is a good example of Dawkins doesn't put an amazing block on Warner, but he gets in position to the point that, exactly like you said, Erik, Singletary can use Dawkins as a blocker and get out of Warner's way without Dawkins really having to get a great hand on him and get a great piece of him. But Dawkins is there and in that position. And look, we get a really nice hole. Everything opens up. Singletary is able to use Dawkins. And then we see the leg drive from Singletary. Singletary has good qualities and he's able to do some things. He just needs a bit more support up front than a star or a stud running back may need. But that's a good example there. When we execute, the running back really has nowhere to go but up and get upfield and get success.
Yeah, and we're not just going to bash the offensive lineman guys. We're going to show you some plays where a running back can miss. And so, I mean, this is again week 1. So you got Spain pulling here. You get 2 down blocks at the point of attack, and it's just a misread by Moss. And I think the turf monster really gets the best of Moss here. But you see the down blocks at the point of attack by Williams and Cody Ford to an extent. You get the puller, and you got a man-on-man with Spain coming up on the linebacker. And I mean, you'd like to see Moss not just, sniff the goal line, but just follow your blocks and walk into the end zone. There's no way this safety over here is going to stop you. So a slight misread, Turf Monster gets the best of him, and he doesn't score on this play.
No. And credit here to Darrell Williams, kind of the opposite of what we saw in the first clip where Wilkins got the better of him on a down block. This time we see good positioning from Williams. We see good hip structure and stance, and he gets the seal.
Steers him perfectly.
Exactly. Steers him and turns him inside. Perfect seal. And Moss just gets on Spain a little too much, and he's a little too close to him. And I don't know if it's because he's on his hip so much that he makes the wrong read, but looking at it from this angle, it's just disappointing that all he has to do is just right here. Nope. Just cut outside. Here. Look, like that lane is perfect. Well executed up front. Then this is part of the frustrating thing as we started to go through the film, that there were times when the line executed, and then when they executed, there would be a fumble or a misread by the running back. And it just seemed like things weren't able to line up just when you needed them to. And this one, again, good job by Spain pulling around and taking his man out. Great job by Darrell Williams. Look, that is a pillar right there in Darrell Williams, standing strong, sealing, turning his man, steering him inside, creating that hole, and Moss just makes the wrong cut.
Yeah, I mean, just a bad read. I mean, read the body language, read the helmet, read the leverage of the linebacker. Stay outside. That's all he has to do on that play, and it's an easy touchdown. So again, Singletary had his moments as well, and here's a pull by Brian Winters, the right guard here. You see the two combination blocks at the point of attack, and as Singletary bounces, you see the torque, you see the body language, you see the helmet of Winters, and he's really torquing him this way. So, it's telling Singletary to get out here. And I understand you have a DB at depth. Well, he takes it inside, and now the pursuit from the backside they're able to bring him down. Now, I will say usually your guard isn't looping this wide. Usually he's staying tighter to the block by the tight end and the tackle for that matter. You see Croft wash Clark down. So normally you'd want to see your guard kind of be tighter here and kick out, as we've seen on several plays. But either way, you read the block, and that block told you get outside. He doesn't, and the Chiefs, they bottle up the play.
That's a good point. I have that literally in my notes here. I would have liked to see Winter stay a little tighter and make that read a little clearer and more defined for Singletary. But to your point, he executes, and you see Winters' head placement, you see his hip placement, you see his body lean and his torque. Everything right there in that image, leave it on it, screams, go outside. You see the block from the receiver on the outside. You see a nice little lane. You're going to end up coming one-on-one with the safety, and you see the points there from Erik. The pursuit is coming from the inside. The line is blocked this well, but you can only hold on to your block for so long, especially as they're crashing down and pinning to the right. That defense is coming back in pursuit to the left, and Singletary literally cuts right back into that pursuit, and he gets stopped for a gain of 3 or 4 for something that could have been a 9 or 11-yard gain, or if he breaks a tackle, who knows if he's still running or not.
Yeah, and I'm making a note here just so you guys, you've seen it on several plays where the combination block, the deuce blocks between the guards and tackles weren't that good. Now, generally what you're taught is you want those guys hip to hip, but also knee to knee. And you can see right off the bat, they're not together right there. They're not together. Now, do they get a little movement? Yes, there's a little gap exchange by that defensive tackle. He shoots into the B gap, but you're not getting all that much movement off the ball. And that guy's, he's able to, make the tackle on the running back out wide here. And I think that's Derek Nottie again here, making the tackle. But if there was better technique on this combination block, on this double team at the point of attack, I think you get a little more leverage. Maybe Dawkins gets more control, and now they're able to get a little more yardage, in that gap inside when really Singletary should have bounced it. So just little things like that, little technique. So you're seeing, sometimes it's the running backs, sometimes it is the offensive line. So the main concept we're going to take a look at is a power. We've done a few of these plays now. We'll do pin and pull next, but this is the one Anthony was talking about of Darrell Williams. So a few things go wrong here, and I had to make so many notes on the film just so that I could remember them. So Winters, he doesn't hold his block. He's the right guard right here on the defensive tackle right here. You're going to see Knox do a good job of washing his guy down, but watch Williams. So now generally, again, usually you're getting down blocks at the point of attack and you're working to that backside linebacker. Well, the Chargers run a little different defense, and a lot of times they have this safety coming is almost like a fringe box player. And that's exactly what they're doing here. So I don't know if this was a game plan adjustment, but sometimes you make those adjustments prior to the game or within the drive or within a game that, hey, instead of Darrell Williams working to the backside linebacker to the right, we're going to have you work to the fast flowing safety coming down into the box. Okay, we'll give him that. Okay, yep. Darrell Williams, your guy is to go get the safety. Now go get him.
Just get him. Just get him.
Just go get him. Okay, so now look at this. Now, hypothetically, if he picks him up, all right, look at how this is blocked up. It's not all that bad. Now, 52 is the one that comes from horizontal distance to kind of disrupt the play, but obviously you have several blue jerseys, including the block, the missed block by Winters. This is Winters' guy, number 93. He goes right down the line of scrimmage, throws Winters to the ground, and you have 4-5 guys right at the ball on, Zach Moss is carrying. So it's just ugly, man. Just terrible.
It's a beautiful scrape by 52, who I believe is Denzel Perryman. I really liked him coming out of college, out of Miami. It's a great scrape by him. And I go back and forth on this one because you mentioned, I spoke about Williams earlier. He comes out even fine. Okay, you were supposed to pick up the backside linebacker, but maybe made an adjustment, pick up the safety. Cool. Just pick him up. Okay, 52 is your guy. No.
Change your angle.
Beautiful. Change your angle. Bring your hips. Bring your hands. Get a piece. Nothing. He completely whiffs. But in rewatching it now, I think every time I change what I hate more, Winters at right guard just gets completely owned. He gets shed within a half a second. The defensive tackle just swims right over him. And again, we keep talking about running back play. If you pause it right here, where's the hole?
Yeah.
Where does the running back go when credit to Dawson Knox for executing a good block, but his two important blockers to that side, Darrell Williams picks up no one, and Brian Winters, who's anchoring that point of attack, gets beat within a half a second. Where is the running back supposed to go?
Yeah, exactly, man. So, I mean, and someone says, Knox did an okay job. Yeah, I like that. I just like how he washed him down, and you see his hand placement gets right on that hip. A defender can't go anywhere without his hips. Great job of driving him down. Again, I thought he did better in that department in 2019, not so much in this year. So, here's a good play. So let's kind of take a moment away from being negative Nancy's here.
Yeah, this is a good one.
It's a good one, but I also want you to pay attention to the leverage at the point of attack of Dawkins. Now, he does seal the hole here, but look at the leverage. Again, that guy's playing into the tackle, and it's not the best combination block. You see Bakker have to pull off and go get the backside linebacker, but that defensive tackle somehow gets sucked back inside, and Singletary's in through the hole. So even a play that worked quite well, it wasn't the easiest thing, at the point of attack on that deuce block again between Dawkins and Bakker. But I did like Dawson Knox down the field here on his block. But either way, good gain by Singletary, big hole. And he's able to do a few things with blockers out in front of him. Nice cutback, inside that block by Knox there. So, again, good play, but there's still some work to be done.
Yeah, it's a great jump cut by Singletary to get back inside and get upfield. But you see, when I saw this initially, leave it right there, I thought Dawkins, when I initially saw this play, I thought you had labeled it wrong as a good run, because I was just like, oh, well, this is going to get blown up, because Dawkins, he's already kind of lost leverage and positioning. Yeah. And then I think the defensive end moves himself a little more inside than Dawkins does. I don't want to be that guy and say that, but the defensive end basically takes himself out of this play. This is a good vision of it right there. Yeah, Eric's highlighted him. He takes himself out. He kind of disengages,
throwing him,
exactly, and comes back inside. And when he comes back inside, he takes himself out of the play. So it's more the defensive end's mistake than it is Dawkins executing a good block. And also, Feliciano recovers well on this play at center, but he gets knocked and driven back almost immediately. But he's able to regain his feet a little bit and eventually kind of anchor down, but he gets blown off the ball. And to Aaron's point in the chat, Dawkins's pad level is very high in some of these clips. He does not play with the bend and the lean and the leverage that you need, especially at the point of attack. And this again is an example here. He was beat, but this should have been a loss. But instead, that defensive end ends up jumping inside, and Motor's able to get upfield. Good pull, Winters gets enough of his man. Again, really solid job from Dawson Knox. At the very least, just get in the way of somebody.
Yeah.
Knox gives good effort, gets his hands on him, and allows Singletary to be able to make a move.
Yeah, and so we're going to get to the second major concept, the second gap concept that the Bills, again, they ran this out of from under center in 2019 with a ton of success. And in 2020, they didn't run it all that often. I think 14 times total. And 5, I want to say, were from under center. Here's one of them. It's Moss in the backfield and just a missed down block. And I think this is kind of what was one of my major takeaways when why the Bills didn't stick with gap schemes or gap concepts is because they're down blocks at the point of attack. And even as you saw, some of those combination blocks or those deuce blocks on power were just awful. You see Williams lunge at the defensive tackle here, and that guy just retraces over the top very easily, and he just blows the play up. Now you have Morse pulling and Feliciano pulling, and Morse doesn't clean up the hole, doesn't clean up the gap, get a piece of that guy right there. Instead, he moves to the second level. Not a bad kick out by Feliciano. He takes on Van Noy there. And you see that, Moss would be one-on-one with Jerome Baker if, everything went quite well on this play. And that's a matchup that I'm okay with. I mean, I like Moss's physicality versus Baker's at the second level.
Yeah, and I'll take a running back one-on-one instead of 3-on-1 with two of those guys in the hole, and you hit it right on the head. Leave it right there. That step from Williams, he leans far too much, more than he does just bringing his feet and bringing his body, and he gets blown right past. And then Morse, I'm a massive, massive, massive proponent of Mitch Morse, but as far as I know, even if your assignment is someone in the second level, if someone crosses your face and you're pulling at lever 1, exactly, you got to pop first color. And Morse instead just lets him go by, and that's the dude that makes first contact with Moss and slows him up. And it also, to piggyback on your point there with Feliciano, decent enough kick out block, but he has him dead to rights. He doesn't bring his feet. He comes and just stops and only uses his upper body and gives him a little bit of a push.
Right.
And doesn't bring his entire body weight. He should have crushed Van Noy coming off with the momentum and his size. If he brings his feet and brings his body and gets low, that's a smash of a kick out block. Despite the fact that Van Noy is good at setting the edge. He did it in New England. He did it for Miami.
Very good,
It's, again, multiple things where just poor execution. And again, that's another one highlighted where Williams misses that initial block. And it's an example of how gap scheme, if that point of attack or one person gets beat in a bad enough way, the whole play is ruined and the whole play is off.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we saw every single play where one guy just screws an assignment. And that down block at the point of attack, those deuce blocks on power runs are the most important blocks. They set the edge. They set the perimeter. They allow the running back to find that alley and get guys in space. So when you don't execute those primary assignments at the point of attack, you're not going to get the movement that you want. And that's part of the issue and why the Bills stayed in zone concept. So here is a backside cut or lack thereof by Brian Winters, the right guard here. You see him as the Bills pull the center and left guard. He does not get a piece of that defensive tackle. You want to see him get him running, but then cut him. You want to see him cut him down or get in front of him somehow. Well, that guy eventually squeezes the gap and makes the tackle. And you see, like, if that guy is picked up, there's going to be an alley coming right through here. And it's just so disappointing to see that, the running backs weren't able to get to that past the line of scrimmage on plays like this, where they were running, the pin and pull concepts that I have been calling for all year.
Yeah, this is one where it's not the best, but if that one guy gets picked up, this has a chance at some daylight. We get a good enough seal there on the edge, a nice turn from Dawkins, turns his man back inside, steers him inside, real quality. Got a man leading up through the hole. We have Lee Smith downfield executing a good block and sealing on the defensive back. And instead, this play is made by the defensive lineman that doesn't get cut by Winters and the edge rusher that comes free and just comes screaming down the line. Again, it's a real shame. You highlighted it again. Oh, leave it right there. Lane is there. The kick out is there on Marcus Golden on the outside. You saw the lane that Erik just highlighted. We see Dawkins turning inside, but Winters doesn't get to his man. And exactly to your point, if you're not going to reach your guy and be able to get full body on him and turn him or ride him past, you got to cut him. Instead, he gets strong-armed, pushed off, and he keeps trying to reach, and he doesn't get anything. And that hit Winters' man combined with that backside edge runs down the running back before he can even really get going.
Yeah, the backside defender. They send a little run stunt, run blitz here. Reddick right here, Hassan Reddick is one of the guys, along with the defensive tackle. I think that's Blackson. The defensive tackle are the ones that chase this play down. The backside defensive tackle and backside edge player chase this play down. That's enough said. I mean, it's just so frustrating.
And I don't want to be too negative on Winters on that one because, like you mentioned, like the defensive tackle steps inside right away.
Yeah, he's slanting.
Yeah, he slants right away, and it makes it a harder block for Winters. But that's when you have to react and bring your technique and your execution and be like, okay, I'm not going to reach him. I got to cut him or just do anything to halt his progress or get him down to the ground to give enough time for my running back. Instead, he lets him kind of basically go scot-free and right into the hole.
Yeah, show a little more drive, some competitiveness. You know, maybe he beats you to the spot. Well, go at least try to cover him up. Go push him. I mean, there was literally nothing there. That's my main thing with that play with Winters. And Dylan's asking, was the relative lack of imagination in the run play calling, all the up the middle stuff on Dable being uncreative or a lack of trust in our personnel? I think there's a good amount of blame in all areas, as we kind of said at the beginning, Dylan. I don't want to cop out, but I will say that I think that the personnel had a lot to do with it. I mean, one of the concepts that I had to cut from all the plays that we talked about were the trap runs. And I mean, if I put those plays on this breakdown, you guys would have just logged off because they literally had no idea to block. You guys remember a play against the Chiefs where Ford was standing in the hole with no one to block. Winters blocked the guy they were trapping, and there was just a cluster. There was another trap in the Broncos game where, the three guys basically shut down the entire run play. Three defensive players in the middle shut down this trap run, and if it would have been picked up, it would have been a nice play. And those trap runs are something that when you're facing light boxes, those are money because you're using angles in the blocking. You're not using power. You're not physically displacing people like down blocks or deuce blocks in gap runs. What you're doing with the trap runs and wham blocks is using angles, using that element of surprise. And the only one that was surprised were the Bills offensive linemen because they literally didn't know what assignment to or got what guys to pick up. Dude, Anthony, am I wrong about that? Remember those trap run plays I had in there?
1,000%. The one with Ford is the first one you talked about against the Chiefs. Singletary has a hole wide open. The only problem is Cody Ford literally just stands in it and he does exactly that. He stops his feet completely and he looks like a sixth grader crossing in front of the school bus, looking both ways before he crosses the road. And he stops so long that Singletary runs into him and he gets chased down for a gain of 2 when it should have been at least a gain of 12 to 15.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, the blame, again, it goes to a lot of different areas. And you're seeing a theme. I think primarily the theme with the offensive line is the guards. The guards struggled. I will admit that Morse, he's my guy. They didn't use him properly. When you only run 60 gap runs, you're not using your center to pull. You're not getting your money's worth from Mitch Morse. So that's something we're going to talk about later. But as far as the guards got to be able to pull. Guards got to be able to execute down blocks. And a lot of these things, we're just not executed. Here's one with Spain. This is week 2. Now, this is a tough block. This nose tackle, Christian Wilkins, is very good, and he's head up over the center there. So why would your guard want to go and get a body on him? Why not cut this guy? Make this guy work over the top of you. Instead, Wilkins just blows this play up. Now those guys in that hole is non-existent. There's nowhere for the running back to go here. And Wilkins is right there. And, you see the running back, Singletary, try to make something out of nothing. But if this is blocked up, guys, if Wilkins is blocked up, guys, look at this. It's so frustrating. You have 2 linemen in Williams and Morse getting out in the space. Like, this play will hit if that cutoff block on the backside is executed by Spain.
Yeah, we get good seals and a good lane and a good hole off the right side of the line and leave it right there. This is how you draw it up. You've got a good seal right there on the outside. You've got a kick out block coming from one puller. You've got Mitch Morse, who's about to lead this play right up the hole. You've got the proverbial convoy leading your running back through the hole. And just because Spain is not able to get a hat on Wilkins and slow him down, look at that.
Yeah.
Everybody, again, another proverbial hat on a hat. The Bills have that all the way down the field. The alley is there. The lane is there. And Spain just doesn't get a piece of Wilkins. And that's even the thing, too, to go back to what we spoke about with the Winters clip against the Cardinals. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to pancake your guy. But Spain has to do something here to impede the progress of Christian Wilkins to the point that he can give his running back time to get upfield. Instead, Spain basically escorts Wilkins to the hole and says, hey, here's where the run is going. Feel free to stop it and not allow a gain.
Yeah, and here's another example of this, another backside cut. Again, this one's a little easier. It's more of a wider shade here. But watch what Nadi does to Brian Winters. So Winters does like we've been talking about, oh, let me cut him. But it's a terrible cut. And Nadi's able to just hop over him. And now look, again, if this guy is eliminated, if he is taken care of, if he is impeded in some way, look at this hole that you're going to have. Like it's there. It's drawn up perfectly. But because Nadi is pressing that gap, working down the line of scrimmage, now he is making a play and disrupting the running back there. And the play goes from, a 20-plus type run to a run that gained just a few yards.
Yeah, because he gets that free access inside. Singletary has to push this wider. He has to get more lateral and horizontal instead of being able to get north and south and get upfield and get yards right away and burst through the hole. And this is, look at it. It's all blocked up. We get a hat on the outside. We get a hat on the inside. We have Morse clearing his man out. There's space. And we get a backside defender making a play again. As we've seen in a recurring theme, and again, it's those gap schemes where if one of your guys is off and he misses that, this whole play gets blown up just because of the misassignment of one guy. And he goes for the cut and he doesn't even get a piece of him. Now he just literally is like, oh, you tried to cut? Oh, okay. And just like steps over him as if Winters wasn't even there.
Yeah, and again, like this is obviously a little different than a zero tech head up guy on Morse. So this is actually quite easier. And Winters is good off the snap. Look at it where his helmet is. He gets his helmet to the play side. He gets his hands to the play side, but I think he jumps the gun and prematurely goes for the cut. Nadi, obviously a big guy, a nose tackle, is used to that, and he's used to defeating him. So he obviously blew that play up. So. Here's a play where, from the Chargers game later in the year, obviously, this is post-bye, a game. If you guys go back and look, I was ecstatic when they came back against the Chargers. They ran some stuff that I wanted. They ran these pin and pull runs, and they got them blocked up really well. Well, guess what? You get great down blocks at the point of attack by Dawson Knox, and Dawkins do a great job of setting that edge, especially versus Bosa there. You get your kick-out blocks and guys leading inside. But then what happens? You get Singletary into the second and third level, and then he fumbles it.
Yeah, this one
fumbles it. I mean, come on, man.
This one killed me, and I feel like I'm going to be the negative Nancy on this one. I like the blocking up front, but the Chargers defensive line all slant inside on the snap.
Blitz.
Yeah, exactly. And they make this is literally like the perfect call for the upfront call that the Chargers have going on right here, and it's beautiful. The alley is huge. The lane is huge. And, of course, again, this is part of the reason why we're getting so frustrated, even on a play like this, when we're like, oh, this is great. And then it's like, oh, fumble. Fantastic.
Yeah. So, I mean, they get it blocked up. They get the pin and pull blocked up, and then they blow it. So a couple more pin and pull runs. We got to touch on Moss because, again, both the running backs had a lot to do with the issues. And this was another misread. You get the down blocks at the point of attack by Dawkins and Dawson Knox. And you have the guards, Spain and Morris pulling, and they're leading out wide, guys. Really nice alley. I mean, hat on a hat out here. But instead of following the blockers, he's impatient. He tries cutting it upfield. And Christian Wilkins, you can see he's got his gap sealed right there. He's stacked. He's got Dawkins stacked, and he's right there with Jerome Baker to make the tackle. Just a little more patience by Moss, and Moss is probably getting up the sideline on this play.
Yeah, Wilkins sees Moss cut. He disengages, makes the play. And it's a shame because, again, Deion Dawkins does a good job of, you highlighted it, sealing that edge and for where the hole is supposed to go. And we get a nice cut on the outside. We get a nice block from the tight end. We have a hat on a hat, or at the very least, we have an opportunity for the running back to, again, use his blockers as obstructive pieces to the defense, a la what Singletary did with Fred Warner earlier,
Yeah.
and get a run. And instead, exactly what you said, he gets impatient and he cuts it upfield right into the defender. Jerome Baker is unblocked on purpose. Hold it right there. He's unblocked on purpose. And instead, Moss gives him a gifted, again, Baker's highlighted right there. He gifts him a free tackle right here and turns Dawkins's quality seal block on the edge into useless nonsense because he cuts right back into where the Dolphin defenders are waiting. And when you think it was the running back's fault, you see things with the offensive line. And then if you think it's the offensive line's fault, you see some plays where it's like, maybe it was the running backs. And it was just this constant bit of just not being able to put the puzzle pieces together to form that complete picture.
Yeah, and that's why, when we talked at the top about the rabbit holes we went down and how we left feeling, frustrated, and, maybe the run game is a bigger issue than we, initially thought. There's a lot of things and there's a lot of improvement that can be done. I think that's what you're going to take from this film. We have another, I think, 2 plays of pin and pull. So we're going to get to a good pin and pull. And this one against the Chiefs, you're going to get the down blocks with Williams and Croft. Great work setting that edge over here on the right side. And you get a little eye candy with McKenzie coming across the formation. Morse and Winters are pulling, and you get the edge. See, you get Singletary to the perimeter, and you get him out in space, and he's able to get a first down on this play. I think it's Sorensen that brings him down, but look at that. I mean, bodies everywhere. This is reminiscent of 2019. You saw Morse pulling all the time. You saw bodies just dropping on the field in 2019, not so much in 2020.
You highlighted film earlier in the year about the quality of Croft and his blocking. He seals the edge. Yeah, leave it frozen right there.
Yep.
He seals the edge beautifully. This whole play starts because Croft is able to seal the edge, steer his man inside, down block him, and create an alley. And then Mitch Morse, our boy, I want everybody who thinks we should cut Mitch Morse to watch this. He comes right around that corner. Oh, just beautiful. He looks for the first flash of color, pinpoints his man. Go back a little further with that Morse pull, because what's beautiful on it, as soon as he comes around the corner, he's got his head up. He's looking for the first man as soon as he clears the corner, gets low, puts a move. We get a good kick out block on the outside, and Singletary is able to get up to the second level and get a good gain. And this was encouraging. This was a quality run. And again, it just points to it can be done. The execution and the consistency just needs to be there.
Bingo, consistency. That is the key. So here's with a final pin and pull run. This one from the Chargers game. Good down blocks from Dawkins and Lee Smith climbing to the second level. That puts Feliciano and Morse. You see Bosa, 97 right there. Try to squeeze in the gap. Look at them work together to widen him out. And then you see Morse pull off to go get Jenkins, number 23. And then we're out into the open field. And this is just, blocked up really well. You see that even I'll give Winters a little credit on the backside too. He's able to get a hold of 95 there, so he doesn't make a play. And again, Singletary into that third level.
Again, with Winters, don't have to be perfect.
No.
Just get a piece of your man. Obstruct him, slow him, impede him, anything. Winters is able to do that. And I love, again, I'm sorry if I love him too much or not. We see the alley and where Singletary is going to go, and it's led by Mitch Morse, who helps on Bosa and then gets to the second level defender, gets a piece of him, and Singletary is off to as much of the races as he can be, and he gets a really solid quality gain on here.
No, definitely. And so that's going to be the end of the gap runs. We're going to dive into some light box runs, a few plays. I think we have 5 plays, but Keith asked, since Bean is on record saying that Morse was not used properly, how thin is the ice of the offensive line coach Johnson on? This is something we talked about in the Slack channel today. And I think it's a good question that was posed, if the offensive line struggled as much as they did this year, and the zone concepts that they ran are more Bobby Johnson type schemes, is a lot of the blame to go on Bobby Johnson? I think there's a good portion of it. To see the drop off from 2019 to 2020, as far as running game goes, because I think they were all right when it came to pass blocking. And again, I think that's what they focus on in practice. But as far as the run game goes, I think Bobby Johnson does deserve some of the blame. I think that, maybe he was just dealing with the cards that were, dealt to him with all the guys shuffling in and out and what Bean gave him. I think that's part of it. But I do think that Johnson does deserve some of the blame, hands down.
Yeah, for sure. It's tough to say it, but when you switch from close to the balance they had in 2019 with zone and gap, again, 156 gap, 110 zone, to coming into 2020 and running 62 gap and 181 zone, it's not because one thing is working particularly well with the zone. It's because you're so deficient in the other aspect that you have to completely leave that aspect off the table. And I recognize to Erik, to your point, I recognize the fluctuations in personnel and the changes and adjustments that had to be made. But at the end of the day, you gotta coach up your dudes to a degree. And there was so much missed execution that some of that's going to fall on the coaching.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I think Anthony and I will give our percentages on where the issues lie at the end of the show. But we want to get to the second glaring issue that we discovered on film, and that was the Bills' struggles to run against light boxes. That's 6 men in the box or less. And to give you a heads up, the Bills ran 169 attempts in against light boxes, against 6 guys or less. And that was the 7th most. So they see a lot of light boxes. Naturally, as we talked about, they have weapons outside. They run a spread passing game. You're going to see light boxes just by formations alone. But they ranked 21st in yards per attempt at 5.1. Like, you just, with the running backs that you have, guys that if they did anything well in college, it was break tackles. It was their elusiveness. Now, they're not the speed guys, but if there's anything that we expected from the running backs, it was their ability to break tackles, one of the main traits that translates from college to the NFL. But even they weren't able to do that. And again, it comes back to a little of the running backs, a little of the scheme, and a little bit of the offensive line. So we examined it. As Anthony knows, we examined this from several different angles. And what we whittled it down to was the running game against light boxes in gun versus under center. Because again, Bills are what? They're a pass heavy team, right, Anthony?
Yeah, we saw the establishment of the pass this year for the Bills, and this is a Josh Allen-led team, a Josh Allen-led offense. They're going to spread you out. They're going to pass it down your throat. And the benefit of that for the offense as a whole is you're going to see those lighter boxes. And when you see those lighter boxes, you need to be able to take advantage of them. When you see the graphics up on the screen, again, the Bills as a passing team, they were in shotgun 70% of the time, which was 11th in the league. But don't focus on the 11th part. Just think of, for every 10 plays, the Bills are in shotgun 7% or 7 times out of those 10. 126 out of the 290 rushing attempts by running backs were in the shotgun, and 70 attempts were in shotgun versus light box. And those light boxes, when you're in shotgun, the Bills are in shotgun, it is their bread and butter. It's what they like to be in. You're seeing a light box. They're screaming for you to take advantage of the defense with the run, and they just couldn't do it. And I can't even read this one on the broken tackles. It's too much. I need you to read it.
All right, so we're looking at a graphic. This is their light box attempts from shotgun. And as I said in the graphic there, they were just bad. And you can read all of the attempts and yards per attempt. 4.5 yards per attempt from shotgun versus light boxes, and 4.3% broken tackle percentage, 24th and 25th as far as yards per attempt and broken tackle percentage. So they're getting light boxes, and they're not getting their running backs to the second level, and their running backs aren't breaking tackles. This is pretty much a failure running against light boxes from shotgun.
In every aspect.
And to get more specific, Singletary and Moss's stats. So the other thing I found interesting was, the fact that Singletary got a lot of these carries. He had 50 attempts, which was 8th among running backs against light boxes, but he only averaged 3.9 yards per attempt, which was 61st. And to put it in perspective, in 2020, he was 34th. And just look at the broken tackle percentage. He couldn't break a tackle, really, against these light boxes. 59th. He was ranked 59th with a 2% broken tackle percentage. But look at Moss, 13 attempts, which was not many attempts, 61st, 4.0 yards per attempt, and that's 60th. And then 15.4% broken tackle percentage, which was 11th, which was good, which that's more where I'd expect him and Singletary. And I will say that when it came to light box attempts from under center, Moss, he excelled in that area. But I want to focus on the shotgun, these shotgun stats, because I just could not believe that they weren't able to break tackles, and they weren't efficient. It's not like they were average. They were just god awful.
Yeah, if they were an average running attack against the light boxes that they saw, they would have been seeing so many more yards per carry or the yards per attempt that they saw here. And 24th in yards per attempt is killing me. And then when we saw those numbers with Singletary, 3.9 yards per attempt, and then Moss 4.0, they both were struggling because of the blocking and the execution up front. But then Moss, at least with the 15.4 broken tackle percentage, at least that shows like, okay, this is one of his strengths, and he's able to translate that a little bit. Like, he's doing what he can. Singletary, not as much. And so if you want to pinpoint and say, okay, like maybe Moss should have got some more carries and he was a little stronger in that broken tackle percentage. But the big key is, regardless of Singletary's 50 attempts, Moss's 13 attempts, there is barely any gap between the two of them in yards per attempt. 3.9 for Singletary and 4.0 for Moss. And that screams to poor execution, poor blocking up front, lack of holes, lack of gaps, and just making life difficult on your running back when you see how similar their numbers are.
Yeah, and here's just a different graphic created by Max, one of our analytics guys. If you're not following him on Twitter, look at the bottom of this graphic at Mafia Numbers. Make sure to follow him. This is courtesy of our guys over at Sports Info Solutions. Kind of gives you a better visual of how the Bills running backs, Moss and Singletary, stacked versus the box. And you can see that the 6-man or less area right here by Singletary in the top right in that graphic, it's below the average, and Moss is just barely above. Both are okay when it comes to 7 in the box. You'll see the tail end of Moss is dipped down as 8+ or more because he's the short yardage guy, the goal line guy. So he sees a lot more stacked boxes. So I'm not too concerned with that, but I am concerned about how they are not able to run, against those light boxes. And this is, from, a Sports Info Solutions, but not just from shotgun. This is just period, men in the box. So, I mean, it puts it in perspective, man, that they just struggled. And so just to kind of round this running against the light box segment out, here are their attempts under center. Under center, I thought they were all right. And a lot of the attempts went in Moss's direction, and he averaged 5.5 yards per attempt with Josh Allen under center. His 30 attempts were 10th. He broke 13.3% of his tackles, which was 11th. You say Singletary, his 20 attempts, his 4.1 yards per attempt were 30th, which again, if you look back at 2019, he averaged 6.5 yards per attempt, and that was 5th in 2019 as far as that goes. So again, we're showing a lot of running back stats, but you can see that there are a lot of, execution issues, but that offensive line and how it's changed and how the scheme has changed from to a pass-happy type offense and to a offensive run zone scheme that it really affected the running backs as well. And again, they have a hand in it, but I think you're starting to see that some of the stats show that maybe the offensive line has a little more factored in or built into these statistics.
Oh, for sure. And this graphic is encouraging because it's like, oh, sweet. Like when they're under center, we're good versus the light boxes with our yards per attempt and broken tackle percentage. And Moss was better and Singletary was better. But again, the only problem is the Bills are only under center 30% of the time because they're in shotgun 70% of the time. So they were better against light boxes in the formation that they use only 3 out of every 10 plays. So even in that, it's a bit disconcerting. And again, it all points to exactly, Erik, as you said, in that the scheme that we're using, that hand is kind of being forced because of what we're seeing up front and because of the lack of execution. And we're having to go in a direction that may not be advantageous to the team as a whole, but it has to be done because we're too deficient in that area in order to execute on a play in, play out scenario.
Hands down. You nailed it there, man. And so let's get to a few of the plays again. I think we have like 5 plays versus light boxes out of shotgun. Again, an area that they have to be better at in next season because they're gonna see a lot of these light boxes, especially those 2 deep coverages to help stop the Bills passing game. So they got to do some things to improve in that area. So what you're gonna see on this play, watch the right guard Feliciano. as the Niners center run stunt. And run stunts, I mean, this is exactly what they're supposed to do. If you have zone blocking, you have everyone stepping to their left this way. What they're doing is, instead of this defender playing this gap as this guard would expect, Feliciano, he shoots in this side, he shoots inside, and now you have the linebacker playing over the top. Bills do it all the time. You guys seen this before. Well, Feliciano is not ready for it, and he doesn't have the athleticism to make up for it and adjust on the fly, and so he gets sent to the turf, and now the running back has nowhere to go.
This one is not, the slant and the run stunt immediately. He's got positioning, and you see you're highlighting him right there. He just whiffs so bad that he falls down. He can't even adjust. He can't make a play on the fly, and that in the NFL, in professional sports in general, very rarely does everything work up perfectly to how you drew it up. The defense does not always play the perfect coverage for the call that you have on offense. But when that happens, you need to be able to adjust. You need to be able to bring your knowledge and your technique and your ability with you to try and do something. And instead, we get no impeding up front. And a 49ers defensive lineman gets straight into the backfield because Feliciano, his first step is just not good. And he gets beat so bad inside. There's just no lateral quickness there. There's no step to the inside to get a piece, to get some kind of shield, and it's blown up from the get-go.
Right. And again, I highlighted at the top, the zone run. Michael's asking, what are his steps? Well, you're stepping play side. This is an inside zone run. Usually your first step is with your play side foot. So his left foot should have been stepping, to the right side of the screen. Now, with that guy in the gap to his right, I understand that his first step should be that small bucket step, that small step to his left, but then process what that defensive lineman's doing. That guy's not shooting the B gap. He's shooting the A gap. Now you got to get your feet in the proper place, your body in the proper place and position. He doesn't there. So that's the thing. Zone blocking guys are usually, especially outside zone runs, your first step is play side. So on that play was to the offensive left. It's play side. And so, again, you have to be able to adjust, though, because that is the number one thing that stops a zone run. A zone run blocking concept are those stunts. And, again, it's something the Bills do a lot of. But it was just – and it happened several times, and Anthony knows there were a few times where Feliciano was smoked on plays like that. He had one against the Patriots where the inside linebacker from depth shot the A gap, and he didn't take his zone step to his inside gap. And the guy just shot right by him. You remember that play, dude?
Yeah, it was real bad. He doesn't. It looks like the snap is called, and he looks up and is just in a daze, and the gap gets shot, and the play is done. It's really frustrating to see, especially because Feliciano's strength. I never thought it was his pass pro. I thought it was his run blocking, his meanness, his nastiness, his edge. I like his attitude and the leadership that he brings, but Absolutely. I knew that his run blocking was his strength as opposed to his pass pro. And in going through this film, I'm not going to say he was the worst run blocker that the Bills had, but he wasn't as proficient as I had believed him to be initially throughout this season.
Yeah, perception can do that to you, right? Especially when you're talking the scope of the season. So here is a power run. So it's a play we've broken down, but look at the box. You have a tight end inline, and you have a 6-man box. Like, this is crazy. And the fact that it's Lee Smith, and they still give you a 6-man box. You have an extra tackle in the game here, and they're giving you a 6-man box. Watch the angle by Bakker on this play. He's the left guard. You see him step down as, again, power run. Those guys are stepping down. That's fine. You don't want him chasing that nose tackle who's going to the left side of the screen here. Jewell's pointing the play out. He sees what's coming. He sees the pull from Feliciano. But you got to have a better angle from Bakker. And Bakker, you guys remember, he's a guy that came from Iowa. They are pure inside-outside zone. These gap concepts are not their strength. Another reason why they went from gap to zone run. So you see the angle's bad there. And Smith, the tight end, falls to the turf there. But again, if everything's perfect here, if Bakker has Jewell covered up, there's a pretty good lane right up in here. But Jewell comes off his block and makes the tackle on the running back. So again, the guard play just struggled on this power run.
Yeah, I feel bad for Lee Smith there being down on the ground, but again, it's not pretty, but he does enough to get in the way of his man, impede him and obstruct him a little bit. Right. And we get, again, a nice seal from Dawkins, who creates that lane. We get the kick out from Feliciano. We get the alley. It's nice. But to your point, again, just right off that snap, Bodker just takes too sharp of an angle when he comes down, and then he tries to round back out on Jewel. And at that point, it's done because the hole is to that side in between the tackle and tight end, and Jewel's got the angle on him. He's got him beat, and it's all because that step, exactly. So he gets too far sharp with his initial cut, and then he has to try and round it back out and bend himself in order to get his hips turned and be able to steer Jewel back inside. And by that time, it's just too late, and Jewel's going to be able to get right to the play.
Yeah, you see the nose tackle pretty much head up on Morse. Now, if that nose tackle was, again, a shade or a 2Y inside of Bodker, that makes sense, but with a zero tech here, head up on the center, and his first movement is away from you, you don't chase the hip. You don't chase that nose tackle. You get to your spot, and you beat that guy to the spot, who Jewel is a run defender. He's always been that guy, a heady player, not the most athletic, but he can sniff out plays, and he does here from the jump. But if Bodker can execute his simple assignment, even with Jewel knowing what play is coming here on the pull by Feliciano, this is, I think, a better gain on the play. Unfortunately, they are not able to execute on this one. So we'll go to the next play. This is a gap run. So, okay, why did they get away from going, to gap runs? Well, here's another example of why they did that. So we have a counter tray. It's not a play they run all that often last year, but you're going to see what happens. So you're going to see the guard and tackle unable to get to the backside linebacker, which is number 51 to the left side screen. Again, a good ways away. And with the safety kind of coming down, playing fringe of the box there, I can understand why that's going to be difficult. But forget all that. Work the combination block, right? Work the combination block on this guy. You have basically a 2-on-1 right there at the point of attack. Well, he is thrown. Bodker is just ragged. Don't get me wrong. Cam Hayward's, he's that dude. But, okay, so now that guy that was supposed to go get the backside linebacker, number 51, who's squeezing down on the gap run on the counter tray, that guy's on the turf, and Dawkins gets a good drive on Hayward, but it doesn't matter because the guy they were supposed to work to is making the tackle right near the line of scrimmage. And you see everyone meeting the running back at the line of scrimmage on, again, what was a light box initially.
Yep, I was going to say light box. Edmonds comes up very late, but it's still light up front. You can still execute on this. And Cam Hayward just says, no, thank you, and chucks a grown man down to the ground. Again, this is another point, and I hate to repeat myself, but you don't need a perfect block. And again, Cam Hayward is an all-pro. He's one of the best. But just get in his way. Just obstruct him. Instead, you get chucked to the ground so fast that Dawkins can't even do anything. If Dawkins wanted to get to that linebacker, he can't because he can't get around the corpse of his guard to the next of him, to the right of him, who's on the ground. And it's even more, it's disappointing in and of itself. But again, when you consider, like we talked about, that light box that is resulting from the threat of the Bills passing attack, and which will continue to happen because of the threat of the Bills passing attack, because it's legitimate, you have to take advantage of these plays. And instead, we get one guy who blows up two blockers, and a light box turns into an advantage for the defense, and that should never be the case.
Yeah, and anytime, like, if this is draft season, when you're scouting offensive linemen, defensive linemen, one of the things you need to pay attention to is how often that guy's on the turf. All right, because how often the guy's on the turf is a sign of his athleticism or lack thereof. Now, again, you also want to see how quickly he gets up off the turf. That's another way to look at it too. But Bodker here, again, I think what they're trying to do is work that combination block, that deuce block at the point of attack. And then it would usually be Bodker, because he's closer, obviously, to pick him up. And you don't even have to chase him. Just stand in the hole. I mean, just stand, and again, impede is the word you've been using all night. That's all you got to do. And Dawkins cleans up Hayward there. But that linebacker is able to squeeze the play, as is, obviously the safety coming from depth and Edmonds. But I think they have a really good chance with Moss versus a safety. Versus a safety, if Bodker is able to somehow stay on his feet and get in the way of that backside linebacker.
That's exactly it. Like, everyone other than Edmonds, there's a hat on a hat on that run. And so at the end of the day, even if it's not the best matchup, you've created a one-on-one scenario with a safety and your running back. Those odds are drastically improved versus your running back versus a safety and two backside defenders chasing him down from the inside. The rest of the play was there. They just get beat by one man, and the whole concept is thrown off.
Yeah, and here's another play by Bodker. I don't want to pick on him, but this shows you how important the offensive line play is against these light boxes. I mean, look at the guys they have up front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. 5-man box. And sometimes this guy over here is not even considered as being part of the box because usually
so
per SIS, it's 2 yards outside the tackle box. But we're going to count him here. And what happens here is you see Bakker lose leverage of the guy he is trying to just lure in. Again, this is what you want. When you're in shotgun, when you're in these situations where you have a light box and you have your safeties dropping out into those cover 2 structures and running away from the line of scrimmage, there are gaps here. There are places to run. Now, Singletary is trying to bounce it right up in here. You see Morse get really good positional leverage on that guy. Well, Bakker does initially, but look at that guy just shed him and force Singletary to cut it back outside, which, okay, good job there by Singletary. But now the block by Morse is not upheld there, and that guy makes a tackle. Again, decent gain, but these plays need to be explosives. And you got to have a running back that can obviously hit it and get upfield. And, if these blocks are executed, you're going to have Singletary getting up inside a little quicker and a little sooner on this play. And if you guys haven't noticed, we're going through several different types of concepts. Draws were a big concept that they like to run versus light boxes and those 2 high structures. You're going to see a couple of those plays. But you're seeing several different plays and concepts where they just flat out aren't executing up front.
No, and you get everything you want from the defense out of this draw. You get Minkah Fitzpatrick, who drops into his zone in coverage. He vacates the camera almost as soon as this play starts. Edmonds drops back. You get Highsmith coming screaming up the field to make a rush. Then Dawkins just basically gives him a little tap and sends him on his way. And leave it frozen right there.
Yep.
You've got Dawkins just waiting. Give me someone to hit. Give me someone to hit. This run should be led by Dawkins going upfield. This should be a 15-yard gain minimum, and it's something that we've seen at multiple points throughout this episode, losing at the point of attack. It's bad to lose, period, let alone at the point of attack, the anchor part of where this run is supposed to go. Bodker loses. It throws off everything. Morse's man disengages from him, and again, we're left with Deion Dawkins waiting for someone to block, thinking he's leading a big gain, and we get some poor execution on the interior of the line, and a big gain turns into just a modest gain.
Yeah, and here's another one. I mean, look at the box. Light box again, another draw, another play that the offensive lineman, Dawkins, on this play tries. It's something I know he worked on a lot last year just from talking to him. It's a club. He tries clubbing him by, but that defender, it doesn't affect him. And again, you see Morse. Look at Morse get positional leverage. I mean, he shoots out there, and there's yardage to be made right here. There's yardage to be had in this gap, and the edge defender right there is able to bring down Singletary. And I will say, part of this is on Singletary. You got to break that arm tackle. Like, break that arm tackle right there. You're already by that guy. You want to see him break that tackle. It's something we highlighted when we were looking at some of the stats, is that, part of the issue was they weren't able to break tackles against these light boxes.
Yeah, and I've got 3 points on this one. The first is Singletary. I'd like a little more burst and a little more explosion to get through that hole and breaking that arm tackle. The second, like you mentioned, is Dawkins. Leave it frozen there, though.
Yep.
The second is Dawkins just not getting enough of his man, pushing him upfield to allow that seal to happen so that Singletary doesn't have to worry about his man. But my favorite is Mitch Morse right there. Rewind it back to, there we go. Watch Morse come out. Morse's man takes a step inside, but instead of going with him, Morse continues to the play side because he knows where this play is going. Exactly what you said, Erik. He just gets himself in position. He creates positional leverage just by placing himself as an obstructive piece. And then when the defender comes back to him, he blocks him and starts to execute. That is a very smart, heady play by a lineman who knows where the play is going, and he doesn't take a poor angle. The guy jumps inside and Morse says, okay, that's fantastic because I know where this play is going. I'm just going to keep going to my spot. I'm going to land on it and get in your way. And it's a shame that that block isn't able to be used more downfield by Singletary because of everything else that resulted on this play.
Yeah, and this is a play. I'm glad you mentioned Morse here because this is a play, 2019 Pittsburgh Steelers night game, that Singletary had a hell of a run to the left side of the screen from the end zone angle where Mitch Morse did this exact thing. He got to his spot, got positional leverage, and Singletary made a couple guys look foolish. It's a play that the Bills ran a lot of draws last year. People don't realize that they were a top 5 team in draws, especially when you include quarterback draws. But Not being able to hit the big plays against these light boxes and those draws is really what hurt the Bills. So here's one from the Ravens game where it's an inside zone run. So again, you got the work on the backside between Feliciano and Darrell Williams, light box, but you see everyone's up near the line of scrimmage. This is man on man. The edge defender to the right here is held because of Josh Allen possibly keeping it here. So there's a hell of a gap right here. Now you want to see Motor just hit that, and you want to see him be at full speed. And for whatever reason, you see him run up the back of Darrell Williams on this play when really, he should have been up in this hole. He should never have bumped into Williams at all. He should have had the vision and the quickness to get up into the hole and get way more yardage than they did on this play.
Yeah, he should have been one-on-one with the slot corner at about the 25. Yep, you circled him right there. He should have been one-on-one, and the hole is still there. Even when Williams is getting pushed into the hole a little bit, the hole is still there. I don't know if Singletary was so focused on the slot defender that he lost vision of Williams, or that his peripheral just got cut off for whatever reason. But exactly what he said, he runs up the backside. This isn't the best executed blocking up front, but it's more than good enough for Motor to get through there and get some yards. We get a nice reach from Morse. We get a good job from Bakker and kicking his man out. The left side is solid. We get a good reach from Feliciano. We get a good reach and attempted a seal from Williams, and Williams seals that off like, we've got it. And then Feliciano's man, Patrick Queen, steps inside, takes himself out of the play. Again, another example of even when some things go right up front, we're not able to execute to the level we should. And again, another light box scenario, another scenario that is saying, like, please just take a free 7 or 8 yards, a la what the Chiefs did to us in week 6 when we played them the first time. We gave that light box with that too high look, and Edwards-Helaire just took advantage time and time again, churning out those yards. The Bills need to be able to do that same thing, considering how much they're in shotgun, considering how much they see light boxes, and time again in 2020, they just weren't able to do that.
Yeah, so obviously you guys have seen a bunch of this film, and it was frustrating, but it's fun because now you can look forward to what you believe the issues are and what changes need to be made. And so let's get into some of that to kind of wrap this show up. Let's get into what we believe the changes need to be made. And there are changes in every area that needs to be done, such as tweaking the scheme. One thing I put in there is, changing the blocking and the calls and the answers. You saw Dable and his staff give Josh Allen a lot of answers to cover zero, to man, to zone, how to beat different areas. Now they need to do that for the run game. They need to switch up some of their run blocking concepts. And as I said, if they want to be a zone team, well, you need to add more tags. You need to have more fold blocks. That's something that zone teams can do, is fold blocks. Okay, well, instead of just trying to get a deuce block on this guy, why don't we flank him with a tackle and then kick out the guard? Like, there are little things you can do in zone schemes to create, angles for the running backs. So also, just from a talent and personnel perspective, they can improve the offensive line, obviously get some better blockers. They have some decisions with Feliciano, Williams, and Seke, I believe. Bakker as well is a restricted free agent. So there's some decisions to be made there. So adding some competition in there, whether it's through draft or free agency. And then I think another thing is the change of pace back. Not necessarily a speed guy, but a guy that can pitch in as a change of pace guy, because as we know, Moss and Singletary aren't the fastest guys, but they also aren't guys that you want split out running routes like, say, James White, a guy that's been in this EP offense. So getting a change of pace guy, but also a guy that has some quickness to get up inside those holes like that last play you saw. And then to eliminate some of those angles. Like if you have a hole like that last one, if you can get that running back into the gap, if you're not, Singletary, a lot of people don't talk about it. Singletary is one of the slowest guys behind the line of scrimmage. And that's not just because of his speed. It's because of the scheme as well. But he averages 2.96 seconds, Anthony, behind the line of scrimmage. That's 52nd out of 55th, according to Next Gen Stats. And that's according to Moss as well, was 2.79 seconds behind the line of scrimmage, according to Next Gen. And that's 33rd out of 55. So they have two backs that spend a lot of time behind the line of scrimmage. Again, not just the speed element, concepts also, and scheme has a lot to do with that. But if they had a change of pace guy that could just get up in that gap and get to that second level and third level and create issues for those secondary players that now become secondary force run stoppers, you can eliminate some angles just because you have some quickness and a little more speed.
Yeah, taking a while to get going and then coupling that with not having that home run or straight line speed, to your point, allows those depth defenders to come from the second and third levels, and they can take some time with their angles a little bit, and they're not presented with as much difficulty coming up to make those tackles because they don't have to worry about that speed aspect, or because guys aren't hitting the hole that quick. And that's, if you're reading that graphic that Erik put up, it's troubling to a degree because it's not just like a one. I hope nobody came into this thinking that there was a cure-all. Then it was like, all we have to do is fix this one thing. I also think we need to trade Josh Allen for Deshaun Watson. But no, I'm just kidding. But there are several things that have to be done or that can be done to improve this team. And as we come into an offseason where the salary cap is going to provide a multitude of chain reactions, and Erik, you touched on it already, with Williams' contract, Feliciano's, Bodker's, and Secchi. We saw some things in the film room tonight, and some things when you look at the raw stats and couple it with what you saw on tape that shows who we potentially can bring back, or what is the type of player we need at our guard position, or what do we need to do when it comes to our scheme. And the good news is when you have a lot of things that can be fixed, it also means there's a lot of ways that you can get better. And we saw the Bills' ability to tweak some things and try to adjust. They just weren't able to get it done in 2020. But as we come into this offseason, Erik, everything you put up on the board, it would be nice to see them get back to the scheme they're most comfortable with. It would be nice to see them get some guys that fit the identity of what they're trying to be when it comes to their running offense and what fits their team. I'm also a massive, massive, massive proponent of that change of pace back. I don't think it has to be this awesome first round pick. I don't think it has to be like Alvin Kamara or Saquon Barkley. To your point, James White, someone like James White, or even like Chase Edmonds from Arizona, they do a great job lining him up in the slot, lining him up outside, running draws with him, and he's so fast that he gets 5 or 6 yards before he's even hit. But if you're not blocking up front, sometimes all that speed doesn't matter, but it will help. But there are a lot of ways that this team can get better. There are a lot of areas that have to be addressed. But the good news is we got a GM who has been pretty adept at identifying needs, going out and attacking them and getting better.
Yeah, and Brandon Beane's presser to end the year was, it was quite transparent. He straight up said, hey, we need to be more athletic in the offensive line. And I think that this is that time, because you have some decisions to be made when it comes to the offensive line. And I think if you have more athleticism up front, it allows you to be more diverse. And I think that's part of, we don't need them to go 100%, gap scheme. No. But I think that is how those concepts and techniques of using angles, not necessarily power. I think those are the ways they need to start attacking, because you're going to get these light boxes, and you're not going to win every one-on-one block. You have to use angles. You have to use element of surprise on those traps and wham blocks. Like, you have to be more strategic on how you run and call plays. I think that's very important when it comes to the offensive line. And so, we talked about some of the changes that need to be made, and I think it starts up front. I've talked about it all night. I think 60% of the issues in the run game were the guys up front. And we talked about all the reasons behind that. I think it's 60% offensive line. I think it's 20% the running backs, as you saw some of those reads. And I think we talked about gun versus under center. I think each of those running backs has strengths in different ways. I think Singletary is better from gun, and I think Moss is generally better from under center. And then you could even break it down more when you look at concepts. But and then the last 20%, I would say, is the coaching, is the scheme, is the play calling and play design, and in play, even in-game calling. I think that they need to be better in that department. So how would you break it down, man? And is there anything else that you'd like to add besides that percentage?
It's going to sound like I'm copying you, but I'm not. You asked me this blindly in the DMs when I was like, oh, if you're breaking it. Oh, thank you for your donation, Alan. And your thought there. Actually, I'll address this thought first. Keep Moss, lose Singletary, get a running back that can catch the ball in the backfield and use Moss for short yardage like Gus Edwards. I don't think if you necessarily want to limit what Moss can do and just pigeonhole everybody like that. I think it's still Singletary for as much as he struggled. Erik, and if you want to jump in as well, for Singletary for as much as he struggled last year, he's still got some talent. He's still got some ability. I don't think the success, you mentioned it earlier, he was coming into 2020 as the quasi starter, basically. He had a really strong end to 2019.
In limited carries, in limited role.
Very much so. Everybody and their mother was saying that Frank Gore needs to sit down on the bench and Singletary needs to get more carries. He looked great against Houston. I think it's a little bit, despite the struggles, I think it's a little bit premature to just write him off completely and discard him and throw him to the scrap heap. I think getting a running back that can catch the ball and run more routes and that, like Erik mentioned, that has that speed factor to change the angles of the defenders and give the defense something more to think about is the way to go. But I definitely think it's too premature and too early to just throw Singletary on the scrap heap.
And I will add to that, I talked to my buddy John the other day about this, about adding that change of pace guy. I know a lot of people use that buzzword speed. It's not necessarily it because, again, James White in this EP offense, he crushes it out of the backfield as a receiver, out wide as a receiver. He runs all the routes. And I asked him, I said, and I want to ask you guys this. Give me one game this year or give me one game the last 2 years where the running backs were the priority, were the game plan, were the mismatch out of the backfield in the receiving game. Can anyone recall one game where you saw them, the Bills throw to the running backs, whether they're split out wide or out of the backfield, be that mismatch, be that game plan, be that priority in any one game this year or last year? No. And that's the thing. The Bills run, again, they run the spread offense. I don't want to get too into the weeds with it, but they run a lot of trips formations, right, guys? They run a lot of Diggs, Beasley, and John Brown to one side, a tight end usually, Dawson Knox as the isolated tight end, and then a receiver on the backside. And in the EP system, what they like to do is run a lot of those option routes with the running back out of the backfield. And that clearing route, whether it's a corner, a go route, or a post by the tight end. And against those two high structures, against advantageous man coverage look on the backside of these trips, they're throwing it to the running back or tight ends. There was not one game in the last 2 years where the running back out of the backfield was a threat. And if you go and watch any of the Brady years in the EP system, with James White, with Kevin Falk, with any of Woodhead, like they had those short, shifty, change of pace guys that are mismatches against linebackers and sometimes even corners in that matter. So I think adding a change of pace guy, not necessarily a speed guy, but just imagine, okay, like Danny Wood, I'm glad you brought him up because perfect example of that last run that we saw where Singletary was a little slow through that gap. Shifty Whitehead, he would have been through that gap. And he's a shifty, smaller guy, but he would have taken someone on at the second level and probably spun off and broke some tackles. So things like that change of pace back, I think could do wonders, not just for the pass game, but it create mismatches and get those running backs, into that hole because it's something that, again, the backs that they have do not get to the line of scrimmage fast as a lot of fans want them to. And a lot of people just tag them with they're not fast. It's not about that. It's not about the speed. There's the quickness angle too that the Bills need, and that change of pace back would do it. But I do think that that's a great question, Alan. I think that adding a different guy back there, a different profile. And it doesn't have to be early, and it likely won't be if that's what they're going for, that change of pace back.
Yeah, I second that, and then I'll get to my breakdown of whose fault it is for why this run game was terrible. That change of pace, you hit right on it. Oh, appreciate you. Thank you for that, Dex. The mismatch factor. It's not always about being the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. What can you do with your scheme ability? What can you do with your mismatches? And as much as maybe this is a bad comparison, but for as fast and as athletic and as great as Alvin Kamara is, he's just a pure mismatch coming out of the backfield on those option routes, on those arrow routes, cutting in the middle of the field. It doesn't matter what linebacker is there. Now you might want to be like, well, it's because he's faster and this and that. But he's also a good route runner, and he's a change of pace back. And that's what he was brought in this league to do, and that's what he was drafted for. You don't have to be a first-round guy or a second-round guy. You can find quality in the third and fourth and fifth round, and it's about creating that mismatch. What can you do in that game, whether it's in the passing game or the running game for your running back? And I think that's where that mismatch change of pace guy really comes from, in having someone like a la Danny Woodhead or a James White, like what we saw in New England before.
I mean, look at Kamara. This is his mock
Beautiful.
draftable database 4.56. I wouldn't say that's fast.
Nope.
So it's not about being fast. It's not about that 40 speed. It's about the quickness and obviously on top of vision and all that stuff. But James White was another guy. He is a 4.59 guy.
Yeah.
So it's not even just about speed. But I just think that's a good element to have. And you saw some of those guys, in the Senior Bowl, guy that's been popping in the Senior Bowl during Senior Bowl week and during the game, Michael Carter, that kind of shifty guy. And a guy that can hit the hole, break some tackles, and played in a lot of zone schemes. And so that's the other thing, man. Like, let's talk quickly about the concepts after you talk about your split and the percentages. Let's talk about going forward, because that's where draft season is going to be fun.
Yeah, I like you. I think it's 60% on the offensive line. I'm equal with that breakdown, 60, 20, 20.
Yeah.
I think for me, that 60 is the biggest point to hang your hat on. I think it's definitely possible that we can upgrade the running back position, whether it's through free agency or the draft. And I recognize neither running back that we have is the best in the league. But I also think to a degree, it doesn't matter how good you are at the running back position. If you are not executing and blocking up front, if by the time your running back gets the ball from his handoff, if he's getting that ball at that time and his point of attack has already lost his battle up front, and he's got a guy in his face right away, and then he's got someone else coming from the backside and another person waiting in the hole, it doesn't matter how fast or how big or how strong he is or how much talent he has. Eventually, you're going to lose those battles. So for me, everything starts up front with that offensive line. How do we address it? And then in the going forward, the Bean comment for me, you and I talked about it, was real interesting for me because, like you and I said, to give everybody a little peek behind the curtain here, and when me and Erik talk in the DMs, when we hear the phrase more athletic, that to me says more zone than it does gap scheme. But when you look at the offensive play calling preference from 2019 and what they ideally wanted to do in the beginning of the year, I think Dable wants to be a gap scheme running offense just off of what you saw from 2019 and then again what you saw in 2020. And I think I mentioned it earlier, their gravitation towards the zone scheme, I think it was less to do with the success of the zone and more to do with the failing of their execution on the gap scheme. I think they want to be a gap scheme blocking offensive line. And if that's the case, I think we're in for a lot of changes up front because this group in 2020, granted there was some shifting, granted there was injuries, but they weren't getting it done weeks 1 through 17.
Yeah, and we need to see a shift up front. I think that some changes need to be made because you're getting to a different era of Josh Allen's play. Like early on, you wanted those maulers, you wanted guys that can move the line of scrimmage in the run game. Don't get me wrong. They got a lot of those grizzly bears is what I called them when they brought the guys like Feliciano in, Quentin Spain. And they wanted to control the line of scrimmage in that way early on because they wanted, Josh to lean on the run game and all those things, all those fancy things that young, quarterbacks like to have early on in their career. But now they're a pass-happy offense, and you just can't have grizzly bears. You got to have athletic grizzly bears if possible. Those are hard to come by. But getting athletic offensive linemen and getting some consistency, because part of the issue this year was not just the COVID offseason, but, the shuffling up front. Figure out where you want guys, first of all, Cody Ford, where you want guys, and then, settle in there. And the guys you bring in through free agency in the draft, like start to find some starters. Not guys that are value guys brought in on value contracts. They need starters. And, as good as Feliciano, they got great value out of him. And he serves a great, role as an enforcer, as a bash brother, as I like to call him. And I think he had his role, but I think we're beyond that now. They need athletic guys, as being said. And not just for the run game, but for the passing game as well. When they're running those 5-man surfaces and empty, they need athletic guys. When they want to get guys on the perimeter, and get guys out in space, you got to have guys that can do that. We saw several plays in this breakdown where some of these guards couldn't get into space. Some of these guys couldn't execute, basic backside cutoff blocks. So there are a lot of things that went into the issues with the run game. We went over two that we thought being the, gap scheme, and then some of those runs from shotgun against light boxes on top of all the changes that, endured with the personnel and everything. So, wow, that was a doozy. But Anthony, as we said prior to going live, this set you guys up for draft season. this set you up for, okay, this is what we saw on film. I want you guys to have your own opinions on this. We gave you ours to finish this. And this is what you need to take into the draft season when it comes to the run game. Because, again, a lot of changes are going to happen from the top down when it comes to the run game and the Bills' offense and offensive line. And so this set you up for that. And it was a lot to process. So I'm sure it's one of those pieces of content that you guys can go back and watch. But we have, just so you guys know, we have the Hoof Live coming up here in about 10 minutes. We went pretty long. This is a record for us. We appreciate everyone staying with us. We got the Hoof Live coming on next, I believe. And then, Anthony, let everyone know where they can find you on social media and what you got going on for your show later this week.
You can find me on the old Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2 ANT. Give me a follow on Twitter, or I'm also down for interesting trades. Feel free to let me know about those interesting trades. And you can find Disguise Coverage live every Thursday night. This week's episode is going to be a special one, much like this episode of the Film Room here was designed to set everything up for the offseason. This Thursday, I will be joined by Greg Thompson of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. He is our resident capologist. I'm a junior man on the account, and he's the senior. He's one of the name partners, and we're going to be breaking down the salary cap and its amounts, restructures, potential cut candidates, what that means for free agency, what that means for the draft, because that salary cap piece is so important, because anything and everything that happens this offseason all stems from that salary cap and what has to be done with it. So it'll be a salary cap special live this Thursday on Disguise Coverage. And yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Anthony. I appreciate you joining me in the film room again. I'm sure we're going to be doing this again. We're going to probably start hitting some prospects if we don't end up down any other rabbit holes from this 2020 season. Hopefully we can start getting into the draft and scouting profiles for the Cover One YouTube channel. We'll break down some prospects here in the next few weeks. But I'm Erik Turner. That's Anthony Prohaska from Disguise Coverage.